Are ya ready, kids?
Hello, it's Employee Emilian, and welcome back to SpongeComs. Today's episodes are Season 2, Episode 3, or Episode 23 overall, of SpongeBob, Big Pink Loser, and Bubble Buddy, both of which originally aired on February 3rd, 2001. And the thing about these episodes for me personally is that I had books of both of these episodes growing up, so although I do have a few little plot holes I want to discuss it with them and yada yada yada, I have a serious nostalgic soft spot for them, so this might be a very fun SpongeComs. We'll see. Big Pink Loser was written by Jay Lender, William Reese, and Meriwether Williams, and was later adapted into the book And the Winner Is, which was a junior book about this episode, and it was basically more or less the same thing, except the cover tried to make it look like some sort of contest between SpongeBob and Patrick. It was a rather faithful adaptation, and I really liked it back when I had the Buried Treasure book. Anyone remember that? That was very big and very full of good SpongeBob stuff. And I think that this is also the last time we see Jellyfish this transparent in Season 2. And this is also the last appearance of Patrick's M eyebrows. After this, he gets Z eyebrows, which is an especially nerdy thing that you won't notice unless you're really, really looking out for it. Because Patrick's design here is more or less the same as it is for the rest of Season 2. However, he's still got the old Season 1 eyebrows. It's a very strange transitional episode for him and SpongeBob, who also sometimes shows his Season 1 body proportions with the much bigger eyes and much wavier outer waves. It's hard to describe, but yeah, after this, SpongeBob starts to look a little more square, so it can kind of feel like the last dying breath of Season 1, in a way. Like, this is the last time you really see the show establishing itself, establishing certain conflicts and interactions, because this is the first time, or one of the first times, they make a really big fuss about Patrick being the dumb one. In my opinion, this is the first great Patrick episode, because if you've watched Season 1 of SpongeComs, you'd know that I think he was just all over the place in Season 1. Sometimes he was the chill voice of reason, other times he was a nutty dude, other times he was kind of just giving bad advice. But here, I think they hit upon a bit more of an oafish portrayal, which he had for the rest of Season 2, 3, and more or less sometimes in 4 and 5. But these were some of Patrick's best years on the show. 2 and 3 in particular were pretty much the golden age of Patrick. I mean, sort of the golden age of SpongeBob, depending on who you ask, but especially of Patrick and his characterization. And this episode I owe great debt to, because without it, I don't think we would have gotten such great episodes as the Fry Cook Games and Rockabye Bivalve, where they really amp up the oafishness, but always give him something funny to say, something funny to do with that oafishness. It's kind of cliche to say that he starts to become like a starfish version of Homer Simpson, but that is something that they hit upon, and yeah, it works. Also, a few things I really like about this episode. The joke SpongeBob makes about him needing to pay Mr. Krabs, which, hey, a bit more unfortunate after Squid on strike, but kind of funny coming immediately after Bossy Boots. And something I like about this scene, the "No, this is Patrick," not only is it a great scene, one of the very first times that we get a seriously banger Patrick joke, I like how poorly seamed the cashier boat is. I think I pointed this out in my showdown between this and No Hat for Pat. In general, I think that I'm being just as chipper about this episode as I was in that showdown, because I've just got a soft spot for it. It's not a perfect episode, I'll get to that in a bit, but yeah, it's just so good. And it's also the first time that Mr. Krabs gives Patrick a job. He appears briefly in the And the Winner Is book, but he doesn't appear in this episode, so I don't think we needed a job application scene, but it leaves a stone or two unturned for later Patrick getting a job episodes. I can name like 5 off the bat where he gets a job. ARG, technically, Bum Vacation, Pat No Pay, No Hat for Pat, and Two Thumbs Down. This is still probably the most popular of all of them. Oh my god, the jar opening scene. Absolutely classic. The thing is, if this scene were in like season 7, I would be thoroughly annoyed by just how long it's taking for Patrick to open a jar. But because they keep on adding all these jokes on top of this simple joke, it works. You're always invested, even the 10th time you're watching it, this is probably like the 10th time I've watched this today. And even though I'm talking over it, I'm still looking at the screen. I'm still really invested in it. And it makes for a great transition into the next portion of the plot, which is Patrick copying SpongeBob, which is also pretty funny, and it kind of brings back playground memories of children learning how to copy one another, playing copy games, bothering each other with them, stuff like that. And I also wanted to talk about the unintentional meta nature of the episode first. The fact that SpongeBob's just this good at winning awards to the detriment of his peers. Like, I made that joke in the showdown, I remember vividly. The fact that he keeps winning the Kids' Choice Awards every single year, even though he hasn't always been the best show on the network. I mean, Avatar, which I'm watching right now in case I ever hit 1,000 subscribers, only won the Kids' Choice Award once since 2003, and that's been about it. SpongeBob's won it almost every year since 2002 or 2003. I like this little bit of SpongeBob commenting how similar Patrick now looks to him now that he's got the suit and tie. Sort of, but he kind of looks a bit dorky in it now, or geeky, because it's just so weird to see it so stretched out on a more rotund person like Patrick. And I think that was also the first instance we see of a CGI rolling ball on the ground as the characters are walking along it, which saves a lot of money, but yeah, it's especially noticeable now that we're watching it on higher resolution screens. And this is something you don't see much of in SpongeBob anymore, them whistling a song, in this instance, Row Your Boat. Like, I was planning on doing this big retrospective of Season 1, and I was going to make note of the fact that they generally include popular songs or sea shanties and whatever. That's something that kind of faded after the early run of Season 2. Talk about other things that have faded after the early run of Season 2. So anyway, I think what separates this episode of, like, copying another character from others is that they spend a lot of time building it up, showing that Patrick's life isn't the greatest, that he doesn't really have a serious purpose until he discovers that doing exactly what SpongeBob does not only is fun and can lead to good jokes, and can grant him powers of telepathy, but it just makes him feel a little more worthy of all these awards. Something that I was wondering when I was watching this episode yesterday, which is October 29th, from like where I am recording this early, who is giving out these awards? Like, where are they coming from? Who is validating all this stuff about SpongeBob being outstanding and achieving? Have you ever thought of that? I really. That's probably the silliest thing about this episode. It's that we have no idea how legitimate these awards are. And another thing that isn't really talked about much about this episode is that the sound effects for this chase scene are legitimately really fun to listen to, like the little xylophone sound effect that they have whenever one of the characters like falls into pieces after the slice and dice. And of course, the hammer sound effects are really cool too. And after all this, I'm just really happy with this ending, exactly where they take it. They make Patrick feel like a real character with real emotions. He's upset that SpongeBob's imitating him, and upset that Patrick, as a person, isn't worth an award, except for one. The only thing Patrick's worthy of doing is doing nothing. Don't know exactly how the jar and the copying and the doing it the Krusty Krab factored into this, but yeah, he did nothing for a pretty darn long time, and I don't know if all that stuff counts, but good on Patrick for protecting his title. And thus starts a very mixed lineage of episodes of Patrick getting a job at the Krusty Krab, but got off to a really good start, I'm just gonna say that much. Bubble Buddy was written by Jay Linder and Will Reese as well, but the staff writer was Doug Lawrence this time around. And with this one, I actually had a book of this as a kid as well, except it was in black and white, and I think it was a coloring book, but I just never colored it in. Just pointing out that, yeah, SpongeBob had a lot of merch back in the day. And I think that this episode also helps people remember that Leif Erikson Day is a thing. It happens every October 9th, and it's meant to celebrate this guy called Leif Erikson, who wasn't exactly a Viking as we know, but he was the first explorer and settler in the United States of America, or as we would later know it as the United States of America. Better celebrate that than Columbus Day, am I right? Something about this opening is that it's just SpongeBob. It helps you feel like he's isolated when it's just him, and voiceovers of Patrick, Sandy, and Squidward, only the latter of which appears later in the episode. I think that works. And here we see SpongeBob trying out all his new friends, up to and including the kitchen sink. That's kind of a pun, and I really like it. Before he gives birth, I think, to his new friend Bubble Buddy. I like the design of Bubble Buddy. I like him as a concept. But I can totally understand why some people wouldn't like who he is as a character and how he fits into this narrative, because this is in the whole monitor vein of SpongeBob just kind of being a bit of a clueless dunce throughout the episode. And I'll get to that as the episode goes on, but I think that this was the logical extent to SpongeBob's bubble-blowing abilities, being able to create life from it. Or at least creating something that looks like it could be real. Who knows? Watch the episode and find out. And then it does come to life, but that's for a bit later. I like the design of him, and I like his appearances in other media, like Battle for Bikini Bottom. I love that joke, too, of the prisoner. That always catches me off guard. But I do like Bubble Buddy as a character, as a concept, and as a character in later stuff. Sorry, I'm just a bit tired at the moment. I also like this reference to the Quarter Pounder. It's rare that the Krusty Krab will directly reference actual fast food chains, but it's kind of surreal when it does, I'll say that. I think the scene of Squidward having to, like, make all the different types of food for Bubble Buddy might be my least favorite part of the episode. Don't get me wrong, like, Goo Lagoon does sort of, like, expand on some of the issues you might have with this, depending on what kind of viewer you are. But this isn't the funniest, honestly. It's kind of going back and forth, making the same point over and over again. It's a solid comedy routine. Won't lie about that. But yeah, sometimes forget it's in here and just feel like having to sit through it, you know? And I think that's generally where some people don't really enjoy this episode as much because it's about annoyance. It's about this guy going around and annoying everybody, which can be funny depending on like how it's done, and I find this episode to be rather funny. I do like a lot of the jokes that they make, but I do kind of understand the angle of someone who is like, oh, Bubble Buddy, you shouldn't do this. Bubble Buddy, how could you? Yeah. I think that this is like the only real part of this whole Krusty Krab routine that I really like when it speeds up. It's somehow more active than the Big Pink Loser example, but less active as well. Sorry if most of this like commentary is just my opinion, but there aren't really any fast facts about Bubble Buddy. I mean, of course, he does appear later on, and this is basically where a lot of the SpongeBob bubble blowing episodes led up to. You'll notice that they only do it like once a season now, if that. Bubble blowing isn't really a part of SpongeBob's identity now outside of advertising. And I kind of wonder why that is compared to like patty flipping and jellyfishing and even karate chopping. And I think it might have to do with this episode because it takes this aspect, this hobby of his, to this tipping point, this watershed. And more often than not, whenever I go to Goo Lagoon in these older episodes, it's sort of like, yeah. I mean, this part is fun. I do really like Scooter dying. I mean, he comes back to life eventually, but yeah, who knows? Maybe this was just because Carlos Alazraki didn't want to be like this major player in SpongeBob. Like, he still comes back occasionally, but yeah, Scooter's kind of faded into the background. But yeah, I do prefer the Goo Lagoon angle to the Krusty Krab scenes because, I don't know, it's just a bigger environment, there are more people around, and it kind of reminds me of a point where Goo Lagoon could be like this big secondary location. Like, this also only shows up like a few times a season now, and I can get why, because there's only so many jokes you can tell with a beach setting and in beach episodes, but also, Grubby Grouper, I forget the name of his guest star, but it wasn't a big name or anything. It was just another one of those guest stars that probably didn't even really need to be a guest star, but sure, why not? And we're coming up on the big old angry mob scenes, which are big old angry mob scenes to be sure. Like, I do enjoy them. Like, it shows just how annoyed Bubble Buddy's making everyone. This dumb little bubble. But, I think the best joke is the whole thing about Tom yelling that he poisoned the water supply and did all of these horrible things. Like, that still sometimes props up on my social media. Have to make it tomorrow's quote of the day, honestly. It's just such an exaggeration of all the things that, like, a horrible monster can do. And, yeah, they're pinning it on a bubble. That's the absurdity of it. That's the joke. And the joke itself, decent, all things considered. I think it's also about time I talk about the twist ending with Bubble Buddy actually being alive. A lot of people are a little mixed on it because it paints the whole episode in a darker light, like he let everyone get irritated to the point that they wanted to pop him. He let Scooter go to heaven. Like, that's one of the only few religious references in the show, so yeah, big deal. I mean, there's no other way to do it. Like, if they actually got to pop Bubble Buddy, you'd still feel sorry for him in some way. And there are a lot of episodes in cartoons about imaginary friends that cause a lot of issues, like the Jib episode of Ed, Edd, and Eddy comes to mind. I just call it the Jib episode because, as I've been over, remembering Ed, Edd, and Eddy episode names is a nightmare. And I think Cartoon Network made this whole other show about play pretend folks, and I forget the name of it, but some of you might be able to help me out with it. I'm kind of being sarcastic because I'm not the biggest fan of it. I'd rather talk about that than Bubble Buddy, honestly. I mean, it's a popular episode. I do get its significance. I do get why people like it. I get why people don't like it. It's a fun episode to talk about, like, was Bubble Buddy actually doing all this? It's got some pretty good quotes, it's got an interesting story to say the least, and it's got this nice little scene of everyone reminiscing about Boo Boo Keys and Funny Muffler and all that. I mean, they didn't kill anyone, so hey, kind of a loss of gravitas, but all in good fun. And I like how they bring it all the way back around to Leif Erikson Day. Bubble Buddy celebrating that. Kind of shows that he is sort of on SpongeBob's wavelength, and maybe another one of my favorite parts of the episode is SpongeBob's little double entendres near the end, with, like, I was holding his bottle, they blow up so fast. I remember we always laughed at that part of the coloring book. So this episode is pretty decent. I mean, I don't have super strong opinions on it, but yeah, it's there if you need it. I'm saying that a lot, but it really is just there if you need it. So that's Bubble Buddy and Big Pink Loser, not in that order. My question of the week for you last week was, what is your favorite Krusty Krab renovation? You guys said the likes of the Krabs a la mode ice rink and the Krusty Slammer. A lot of popular post-movie ones. The Krusty Towers, the Born to be Wild cool restaurant for bikers. Mr. Krabs' change of heart in Born Again Krabs, Krusty Towers again, and when Squidward turned it into a 5-star restaurant. Me too, love that. My question of the week for you this week is, what is your favorite Patrick episode? I say that because of Big Pink Loser, because that is honestly where Patrick episodes start to get, like, really good. Like, there were a couple good ones in season 1, but Patrick became a super reliable character for the next couple years, and I have Big Pink Loser to thank for that. Honestly, my favorite would actually have to be Roller Cowards from season 5, but I'd like to hear you guys' thoughts. And next week, we've got the explosive and deceitful world of Dying for Pie and Imitation Crabs. Goodbye for now.